My name is Brent Peterkin, and I'm currently the executive director of an organization called Gather New Haven, which focuses on a couple of things: environmental education, public health, urban agriculture, conservation, and community development. And we do that work. We're inspired by food justice and environmental justice initiatives, and our work is conducted through a portfolio of efforts that include property management and programs. And we manage 56 community gardens throughout New Haven. Um, and we also manage 6 nature preserves, also in New Haven, and 7 urban farm properties as well. And as part of that effort, or at these properties, uh, we implement a program that focuses on sailing education and coastal and environmental education. So we teach kids how to sail. We teach them about the coastal marine environment as well over at the Long Wharf Nature Preserve. We also conduct a farm-based wellness program, which seeks to address chronic diet-related illnesses, um, which predominantly impact Black and Brown communities in New Haven. And we do that by inculcating information that essentially seeks to spur lifestyle changes. And we also operate a farm stand as well at our farm sites as well. And then we also have a program that focuses on youth development and entrepreneurship called Grown Entrepreneurs, which targets high school age youth. And we teach them how to start a business venture if they so choose, but we do employ them year round. And we also help them develop skill sets in the fields of carpentry, composting, and urban agriculture as well. And with the community garden properties, we offer material resources, everything from seeds to soil, to technical assistance in helping people get started or to better maintain their garden beds across the 56 community gardens. And so um, these properties and these initiatives are citywide. And so our recruitment efforts are citywide for our programs, and the properties are dispersed in pretty much almost every neighborhood in the city of New Haven. And what attracted me to this work is essentially rooted in the environment that I grew up in. So I'm originally from New York City. I moved to Connecticut 10 years ago. I grew up in the Bronx. Um,
What part of
and
the
it,
Bronx? What
oh,
part of the Bronx?
oh yeah, sure. I grew up in an area called Parkchester, and so that is sort of right in the middle of or in between Castle Hills, the Castle Hill section. This is all the East Bronx, and Soundview, or probably like the 2 closest areas of reference. And so I grew up there, and grew up around a lot of people from the Latinx Hispanic community, and also a lot of people from different African peoples, I should say. So, there's diversity within that. So I don't want to present a monolith. But Caribbean peoples, people who have roots that trace back to the deep South here in the United States, but also people who have roots that connect back to Eastern and Western African countries as well. So that was my peer group, and those are the groups of people and their ethnicities that influence my upbringing and the things that I have an affinity for, and the people that I care most about. And so when I had the opportunity to get involved in social impact work in either the public or nonprofit sector, I decided that it was important to me to have a purpose-driven approach to my career development and aspirations. And essentially what that entails is being in agency or in service to the uh, developing solutions to address challenges that impact Black and Brown communities, or being an agent that can help to facilitate advancement towards the fulfillment of the aspirations for Black and Brown communities. So sometimes it's not just addressing a problem, sometimes it's about helping people to advance an idea. And so I've been privileged in that I've been able to land roles in different organizations that have allowed me to do that.
Now, you mentioned food justice. What is food justice? Because I think that's an expression that is now commonly used. What exactly is food justice?
Sure. So there are different denotations and connotations behind that term, but essentially what it does is it intersects the one's ability to access healthy foods consistently, and racial justice and economic related issues. And so it speaks towards the intentionality or the unintended consequences associated with public policy and urban design or land use. So if we look at certain neighborhoods in New Haven, for example, Newhallville, you would be hard pressed to find a fresh food grocer in that neighborhood or that part of New Haven. And
And
we'll
why is that?
just because of the way that the neighborhoods were designed. So my understanding is that, and specifically with Newhallville, that neighborhood was largely developed to allow for close proximity for workers at some of the munitions manufacturers like Winchester and others that were not far from that area, so that they can essentially commute very quickly to work. And that's a very common thing. So, for example, in New York City, Queensbridge housing projects was largely constructed to provide, proximate residency to the industrial parts of Manhattan and Queens, which had allowed for German and Dutch and Italian workers at the time, and also African Americans who migrated from the South or the Caribbean to United States, specifically to New York City, to be able to get to work very quickly and get home relatively quickly. And so when you have the deindustrialization of these cities that in these neighborhoods that were zoned, that were not zoned for commercial enterprises, you just don't have grocery stores and things like that that are placed in the neighborhood.
And
And
is that are these areas considered food deserts? Is that what is commonly referred to as a food desert?
it is, but the parlance is changing as well, as the paradigm is shifting in relation to how we view these dynamics. So the word desert denotes a naturally occurring um, phenomena, and so a desert is a result of changes in nature in the natural world. Whereas when we use the term food desert, it kind of makes it appear as if these things happened organically, or they weren't the outcome or the result of intended or unintended consequences. And so what's used now, the common parlance or colloquial language that's used now is food apartheid. And so when you think about some of the concerns that are surfacing or have surfaced, I should say, when it comes to gentrification, what comes along with community development and the redesigning of neighborhoods is commercial enterprises and the changing of zoning ordinances in certain neighborhoods. So a lot of times those are, the key indicators. So for example, um, just not to harp on New York, but like you'll know that the neighborhood is changing when you start to see a Starbucks, or when you start to see like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's. You
Sure.
start to see some of the amenities that people in higher income communities have grown accustomed to and are quite normal. But you don't find those same amenities or commercial enterprises in lower income communities. And a part of it is because some of these businesses feel like there's no viable market there, but there is.
Well, we know that's not true because
Yeah,
we shop at Trader Joe's and all the
exactly.
rest of those places. So it's not as if the demand isn't there. What's not there is the supply,
Right.
so to speak. So what is Gather New Haven doing about that, or what do you hope to do about that?
Sure. I mean, and there are people that have done stuff like that, about stuff like Magic Johnson, right? And through his enterprises and introducing businesses to low income neighborhoods, predominantly Black and Brown neighborhoods, which helps to offset some of that stuff that I just talked about. But specifically with Gather New Haven, There are a couple of things. One is the management and resourcing of the community gardens throughout New Haven um, allows people, residents who are actively engaged in these community gardens, to essentially grow their own food in perpetuity. So we're in the business in this regards in property management and making sure that the gardens are well resourced to the best of our ability. We don't collect revenue, so it's all provided for free to the residents. So we fundraise to be able to do this work. That's donations and grants and things of that nature. And so, but the gardens themselves are community led. It's contingent upon the residents deciding about what they want to see flourishing within the gardens. And so each year they submit requests about what seeds they will require, or what seedlings they will require for their gardens, what resources, whether it's soil or compost or some kind of fertilizer, or even if it's an infrastructure project, like they might need new fencing or something like that, or new signage or a shed or tools, hand tools at their garden. We'll do our best to provide those resources. But you can either have a garden where people are growing out of their own bed, and that provides food for their family and their households, fresh foods. Um, or you have people who have more of a communal practice at some of these gardens where they're sharing what they grow and bartering and exchanging tomatoes for okra or peppers for snap peas. And that's a way to have, essentially like a cashless economy, which is valuable, especially in environments where there aren't fresh food grocers.
Well, I would think with 56 that this is kind of caught on with different neighborhoods and different neighborhood groups, because 56 is a lot of community gardens. What are you finding that people, why are you, what do you see as the reasons people are doing this? Is it for hobby, or is it really to be able to grow what is going into their bodies? Or is it a combination?
I would say all of the above. So one thing is that it is actually a part of, in many respects, it's a part of our culture or ethnic heritage, right? So the practice of growing your own food or homesteading to a larger extent is an heirloom. The further we're removed we are from older generations, the more we're into it, and then we get caught up into an industrialized lifestyle. So a lot of folks in New Haven have migrated their roots. If you're of African descent, your roots trace back to parts of the South, North Carolina, South Carolina, and even further, Alabama, and other states as well. And in the South, and just like in the Caribbeans, growing your own food and having a garden is normal.
It's normal,
That
right?
is not unusual. And so those practices, especially with the Great Migration, were brought up to the Northeast. And in fact, people were doing it in the Northeast already. So you have people who are growing just because that's what they were accustomed to, right? As far as the older folks. You have others who are growing because they have an interest in picking up a new hobby that's going to be rejuvenating themselves and their household physically. Um, and some people grow because it gives them peace of mind. There's a therapeutic effect or impact that comes along with getting your hands and your comes
Yeah,
along with
I can see that. Yeah.
soil, and being able to work independently but also be able to work as part of a collective as well.
Now, what about your farm stands? I know if I remember correctly, you have one on Grand Avenue. Is it Grand Avenue up there? Seatown, is it supermarket? I think you have one somewhere around there.
We don't. Our farm stand is actually at one of our large farm sites called the Ferry Street on 613 Ferry Street.
Ferry Street.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay.
Uh,
Actually, I'm in the right. I know where you are because I associate everything with buses. The bus goes up Grand Avenue to Ferry Street. Okay. So how is that operation going? Is that a place where people, as a rule, come and shop? And how is that going?
sure. So we haven't opened it up yet. It's too early in the year, but we expect that we'll be in position to open it up around mid-June. And essentially, it goes pretty well. It's not a huge revenue driver for the organization, but that's not the reason why we do it. The reason why we do it is because it's another touch point, to access point for people in the Fairhaven community and beyond, to be able to buy local, organically grown fresh foods. And at the farm stand, we accept SNAP food assistance benefits as well. So people with senior benefits, SNAP or WIC, are able to use those benefits at the farm stand as well. We're currently waiting on the renewal of our retailer license to accept SNAP this year. And once that's in place, we'll go ahead and open up the farm stand. Last year, we were actually able to double our forecasted revenues through the farm stand, but that wasn't that increase wasn't due to patronage from just anyone. It was actually an increase in people who use SNAP benefits, who are on food assistance, which is great for us because it shows that the way that we've approached getting the word out and marketing this resource has been landing on the ears of the right people. People who are of means can shop anywhere.
Sure.
They can get in a car, they can go wherever they want, accessing fresh and healthy foods in their own community is not something that is a struggle for them. But for people whose communities are populated with package stores and bodegas, where you're lucky if you can get a fresh tomato, having this kind of resource, especially for people from lower income populations, does offer some ease. I think that we have a long ways to go to really meaningfully address food insecurity issues throughout New Haven, but it's a start.
Now, do you find that the people that you are working with, the people who operate these gardens, and when I say the people who operate them, I am talking about citizens who come and utilize the gardens to grow, are they spreading the word? They getting the word out that these gardens exist and the benefits of these gardens? Because there's a very sincere health benefit to people growing their own foods, particularly if you're in the minority community, which is our diets tend to be very heavy in fried foods and food that isn't, just not healthy for you. So I'm wondering if this is like an effort to get more minorities to eat healthier, or I'm sure that's part of Gather New Haven.
Sure. I think we have some work to do as far as promoting the gardens. These are landmarks in some neighborhoods, and they're all, different. They reflect the neighborhood that they're in. I think for those who are in the know, these are well-known resources, but you kind of have to be within that community, that gardening community. What I found is that most residents have a transactional or passive relationship with many of the amenities and resources and even municipal or state agencies in their community. So, prior to this work, I worked on an initiative called Project Longevity. And one of the things that I would share with people in law enforcement is that the the extent in which people expect or would appreciate an interaction with government is their postal worker, the DMV when they have to, and making sure that their sanitation is picked up. And so it's not far removed. Like our reality is not far removed from that. So you have people who want to eat healthier, who definitely want to have improved dietary lifestyles. But as far as actually getting out there and getting in the dirt and growing your own food and harvesting it and dealing with the pests and all of that stuff that comes along with it, that's a smaller audience that's encouraged and has the ambition to do that. And so the challenge for us is how do you contend with that, right? In a way that respects those who are getting their hands in the soil and have the skill set and the desire to pursue that endeavor at the community gardens. But also, how do we think of ways beyond just our farm stand, right? How can we think of ways to urban agriculture to increase the distribution of healthy foods throughout our city for those who either just that's not their thing or they don't have the time, right?
I was going to ask you, do you think this is a time maybe back to here? It's just so easy to run to the store, pick up a bushel of, you know, broccoli or string beans or whatever, as opposed to going out into your gardens, toiling the soil, so to speak. Do you think that has a lot to do with it? People just don't. have or want to take the time?
I think that's a part of it. For those who are able to incorporate gardening into their lifestyle, it's an hobby or it's a practice or a way of life that is harmonious with everything that falls in harmony with everything else that they're doing. And it also depends on what stage in life you are at. So if you're someone who's older, whose kids are grown, you may have more time to lend to that. But if you're a person who has career aspirations, young children, you're trying to do all these different things, you may be able to do it, but it's difficult. And with growing anything, you can easily be disheartened if you put a seed in the soil, or you put a seed in the soil and it dies in a couple of weeks and you're unable to harvest anything. It's kind of disheartening, and you may not be encouraged to continue with that practice because you may feel like you have a brown thumb. But it's something that requires effort and diligence.
Yeah, I know that when you mentioned people who don't have, their kids are grown, they don't have a lot to do, they can afford to take on this hobby, so to speak. And that's what I tell my brother and sister. I say, "You're old. That's why you want to do. That's why you want to do the gardening now." But once they got into it, I mean, they're really enthusiastic about it. It's, in terms of, we get together and Zoom Wednesdays and Saturdays, and sometimes the gardening is taking over that conversation.
Mhm.
So there is something definitely that people get out of it when they do it. I mean, my sister's building a greenhouse. That's how excited she is about it. Well, is there anything else you would like to add here? We have a lot to talk about, you and I. I know that you're into a lot of things, and we are keeping this focused on just the community gardens, but I hope to have you back to talk about some of the other things that you are doing, such as with the environment. I love the idea of the entrepreneur program and some of the arts and things that you have going on. So I would love to have you come back and discuss those things too, because those are certainly important to having a well-rounded community. But is there anything else you'd like to add about Gather New Haven and growing food and so forth before we get out of here?
Sure. I think that I would encourage anyone, especially people who live in communities where diet-related issues are prevalent. Type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and also areas in which there are food deserts or areas that are impacted by food apartheid, in which you don't have access to local and organically grown foods, is to engage the community gardens and build relationships, whether you garden there or not, right? It's to build relationships, because what that does is does a couple of things. One, it increases your social capital because you're connecting with your neighbors, and you never know what comes out of those relationships. And that's what the
A stronger
community.
community comes out of those
Exactly,
relationships.
right? That's exactly what the
Right.
product of a community is, are the relationships. So when we think about living in any city and you think about moving, what do you think about leaving behind? Your friends, right? You think about leaving behind your neighbors. And so that's one thing. The other thing is specifically for people who are specifically for African peoples and people who are of indigenous populations and Latinx and Hispanic communities, and younger folks, more specifically, is that this is a part of your culture and ethnic heritage. This stuff is in your DNA. The first practitioners of agriculture sciences on this planet were people who look like you and I. Tap into your roots, get your hands into the soil if you can, or build a relationship with someone in your neighborhood. And a lot of times it's someone who's more senior. So the garden is a metaphor, right? It's a place of diversity, it's a place of growth, it's a place where knowledge can be cultivated. So even if you're not going to get out there and grow snap peas or harvest snap peas or help till the soil, have a conversation with someone who's older than you, because you may find a mentor, you may gain some wisdom that can help guide you in the path. So view the gardens as a place of engagement, not just a place where you can grow food as well. So become familiar with them, become acquainted with the people who are there. You may get a spot in the garden yourself and start growing stuff, but I think at minimum you'll develop a new friend and a new neighbor.